Hey everyone and welcome. So you have an amazing idea for a video game. That's awesome. But what's the very first thing you should do? If you're thinking fire up the game engine and start coding, I want you to pause for a second. Today we're going to talk about what is without a doubt the most powerful and most overlooked step in the entire process, the plan. We're going to walk through the entire design for a simple, beautiful snowboarder game, and you'll see how just a handful of decisions made on paper can literally define the entire game before you ever write a single line of code.
You know, it is so tempting to just dive right in and start making things move on screen. I get it. But this quote right here is the golden rule. Starting with some kind of visual, even if it's just a doodle on a napkin, gives you a target to aim for. It's like trying to build a house without a blueprint. Sure, you can start nailing boards together, but you'll probably end up with a very weird-looking shed instead of the dream home you imagined. Having a visual keeps you honest and focused. It constantly answers the question, what am I actually trying to make here?
So here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we're going to talk about why a plan is your absolute best friend. Then, we'll get into the fun stuff, sketching out the visual world our player gets to live in. After that, we'll build the rulebook, what the player can and can't do. Then, and this is my favorite part, we're going to define the feeling we want the player to have. And finally, we'll see how it all clicks together in the core game loop. Sound good? Okay, let's jump in.
All right, first things first, the power of a plan. Look, making a game is basically an exercise in making thousands of tiny little decisions that all affect each other. A plan isn't meant to be a rigid, unbreakable contract that stifles your creativity. No way. Think of it as a map for a road trip. You know your destination, but you can still take scenic detours and find cool stuff along the way. The map just ensures you're always heading in the right general direction.
Think about it like this. You have this huge, exciting idea. I want to make a snowboarding game. That's great, but it's also kind of intimidating. It feels like this giant mountain you have to climb. So where do you even begin? Well, a plan forces you to break that mountain down into a series of small, manageable hills. You start making a list. Okay, I need a player, I need some snow for them to ride on, I need a finish line. All of a sudden, it's not this scary, massive project anymore. It's just a to-do list. It's your step-by-step guide to building your dream.
Okay, so now that we know why we need a plan, let's start actually building it. And just like our opening quote suggested, we're going to start with the visuals. This is where we define the absolute core building blocks of our game world. And to be super clear, we're not talking about creating breathtaking, polished art right now. We're talking about the essentials, the things a player has to see to understand what's going on.
For our little snowboarder game, the entire visual universe can be boiled down to just these 4 key things. That's it. First, you've got the player, the star of the show. Then, the finish line, which gives us a purpose. You need the track, which is basically our playground. And finally, particle effects. This is the secret sauce that really makes the game feel alive. So let's break down each one.
First up, our hero, the player character. Now, pay close attention to the description here. It doesn't just say a snowboarder. It specifically says they are capable of front flips and back flips. That tiny little phrase tells us so much. It immediately signals that this isn't some hyper-realistic snowboarding simulation. This is going to be more arcadey, more about fun and style. That one design decision right here on paper sets the entire tone for the game's physics and feel. Next up, the finish line. This might seem obvious, but without a goal, you don't really have a game. You just have a toy. A finish line gives the player a clear, simple purpose. It defines what a level is. It creates that fundamental loop of challenge and reward. It's that big, satisfying moment where the game can say, "You did it! Good job!" It's probably the most ancient and effective tool in a game designer's toolbox. All right, now for the world itself. The plan is really specific here. The track is built with sprite shapes. Now, for anyone who's dabbled in the Unity game engine, you know exactly what this means. It's a tool that lets you draw these wonderfully smooth, organic curves instead of using clunky, square blocks. And why is that so important? Well, you can't really have a smooth, flowing snowboarding game if your character is bumping over a landscape made of Legos, right? The choice of the tool is directly serving the intended feeling of the game. That's smart planning.
Okay, and now for what might seem like a tiny detail, but I promise you, this is where the magic really happens. This is all about what designers call game feel, or juiciness. The plan calls for dust trails, but with a very specific rule. They only show up when you're on the ground. This is brilliant. It's not just for looks, it's a constant, subconscious form of communication. When you see that dust kicking up, your brain knows, I'm safe, I'm grounded. The second it disappears, you know you're airborne, and you instantly start thinking about how to land. It's an incredibly powerful feedback tool.
So we've painted the picture. We have a clear idea of what our game is going to look like. But a picture is static. You can't play it. Now we have to breathe life into it by building the rulebook. This is where we define the logic of our little universe. What can the player do? What are the consequences of their actions? What are the fundamental laws of physics in our game world?
Our plan breaks down all that logic into these 5 core systems. This is basically our to-do list when we finally start coding. We need player control, how we move, a speed boost to add a little spice, the logic for those grounded particles we just talked about, the finish line logic, which is what happens when you win, and of course, the big one, crash detection or what happens when you lose.
Let's dig into the controls. Moving forward on a snowboard is a given, but the real meat of the gameplay, the skill you're actually going to have to learn and master, is the rotation, tilting forwards and backwards. This isn't just for doing cool-looking flips. In a 2D game like this, being able to control your rotation in the air is absolutely critical to survival. You have to be able to align your board with the angle of the ground to stick the landing. This is the core skill of the game. And then we have a speed boost. I love that the plan calls this optional, because it highlights a great design principle. The game is complete without it, but adding it gives the player more agency, more interesting choices. You're flying toward a giant chasm. Do you play it safe and hope your momentum carries you across, or do you hit that boost, go flying, and risk coming in way too fast for a safe landing? It's that classic risk versus reward decision that makes games so compelling. And here we have it, the stakes. The entire conflict of the game is defined by this one simple rule. If your character's head hits the ground, you lose. The level restarts. Think about how powerful that is. It gives weight to every single other action you take. Every jump, every rotation in the air, it's all done under the shadow of this one failure state. Without this rule, you just have a physics sandbox. With this rule, you have a game.
All right, we've talked about what the game looks like, and we've talked about how it plays. Now we get to what might seem like a fluffy concept, but I'd argue it is the single most important part of any design plan. We need to define the why. Why are we making these choices? The answer is that every single visual, every single rule should all be working together in harmony to create a very specific feeling for the player. This is what designers call the player experience. It's the vibe, the mood, the emotional takeaway. When somebody finishes playing your game and puts down the controller, what is the one word you want them to use to describe how they felt? Powerful? Smart? Scared? Triumphant? Nailing this down beforehand acts as your compass. It ensures all your creative decisions are leading you to the same destination. For our snowboarder game, the plan has a crystal clear emotional goal. The player experience should be smooth and relaxing. This is our North Star. Now think back. Why did we choose sprite shapes for the terrain? To make it smooth. Why do we have those dust particles for feedback? To make it less frustrating, more relaxing. Every decision we've made so far can be justified by this one simple statement. If a new idea doesn't make the game feel more smooth and relaxing, it doesn't go in the game. Period. And this just brilliantly illustrates how much that one decision matters. Smooth and relaxing was a choice. We could have gone in so many other directions. What if the goal was fast and out of control? We'd probably add screen shake, motion blur, and way crazier physics. What if it was dramatic? We'd have swelling orchestral music and slow motion moments. Or my personal favorite, 1980s action stuntman. I'm picturing explosions and a synth rock soundtrack. The core idea is the same, snowboarding, but the resulting game would be completely different.
And so, this brings us to the grand finale of our plan, the core game loop. This is where the visuals, the rules, and that all-important feeling all come together to create the fundamental, repeatable activity that the player does over and over again. A great game loop is simple to understand, satisfying to repeat, and feels perfectly in tune with the game's emotional goal.
So, I want you to just think back on everything we've laid out. We've got our snowboarder who can do flips, we've got our smooth terrain, we've got our finish line, and we've got our crash condition. So, with all that in mind, what does it all boil down to? What is the single most important rule that dictates how you play from moment to moment? And the answer is just that simple. The core mechanic is just don't crash. That's it. It isn't about collecting coins or fighting enemies or getting a high score. The player's entire focus is on maintaining flow, landing smoothly, and surviving the run. The entire objective is about avoidance and grace, which, as you can see, perfectly serves that goal of creating a smooth and relaxing experience. It all fits together. Which leads to a core game loop that is beautifully, wonderfully simple. Just reach the end.
The player starts the level, they snowboard down the track trying not to crash, and if they make it to the finish line, they've succeeded. That's the whole loop. This incredible simplicity is what allows the player to stop thinking about complicated rules and just get lost in the satisfying feeling of cruising down the mountain. It's not about the destination, it's about the journey.
So there you have it, a complete plan. We started with a visual idea, built a set of rules, targeted a specific emotion, and wrapped it all up in a simple, elegant game loop. The character in the project this was based on is named Barry, but this whole exercise is about showing you how to bring your ideas to life. So the only real question left is, what's your game? What story do you want to tell? What will you name your character? That first small creative step, that's where every great game begins. Thanks for tuning in.